Hello, good morning, and welcome to the Football Digest podcast. I'm delighted that you're here with us to keep us company. I'm sure we've got plenty to discuss over the next hour or so in the esteemed company of my Daily Mirror colleague, Andy Dunn, Chief Sports Writer, Jeremy Cross, Chief Sports Writer at the Daily Star, and Matt Dunn, football aficionado at the Daily Express. Guys, it's been a really interesting week, isn't it? We're going to look at all the fallout of the Champions League. An amusing answer from Pep Guardiola to the secret of his success, I should say. European fixtures in general, really. The Thomas Tuchel revolution. I think Andy's going to have to really get ready to eat some humble pie over everything he said about Frank Lampard, isn't he? Can Liverpool still make the top four in the relegation scrap, and who is in danger? And even a look at the Euros and the future for international football this summer, the much vaunted European Championships. Just what sort of form should they take place? And how, in reality, will they take place? But let's have a look, really, at the fallout from last night. How many is it now? How many straight wins is it for Manchester City? I'm losing count. I mean, it's just amazing. Thank you, Jeremy. 19. You're better at your maths than me. I mean, Jeremy, let's start with you because, I mean, and again, it was just toying with the opposition, wasn't it? I mean, it's almost a bit embarrassing, isn't it, for the rest of football? I mean, that's in no way decrying what the achievement of Guardiola and his players, but hasn't it become a bit embarrassing? I mean, they're walking all over Premier League teams, and now they're doing it in European football's Premier competition as well.
Yeah, look, last night you're right, it was embarrassing. They totally dominated. It was like watching a cat pour a ball of wool, really. I mentioned that in the match report. It was just so easy for them. They didn't have to get out of second gear. They were 1-up after half an hour, and you thought could be 5-6-7-0. I felt really sorry for Mönchengladbach because far better sides than they have struggled to work out a plan how to stop City because, well, there isn't one, basically. They won 2-0. It was a canter. They're breaking more and more records as the weeks go on. They're a wonderful team to watch. They look unstoppable. They're like a steamroller, just flattening everything in the way. And what's remarkable about it is, as well, that this has all happened during the oddest season of all. You know, COVID and all that. No fans. They've actually had COVID in the team a month ago, maybe a bit longer, but I can't remember when that was. December, I think it was. But so, you know, they've had problems like everyone else, but they just seem to have been re-energized from last season. I know we've talked about this before. They had a bit of a plateau last season. Liverpool obviously took everyone to school last season and romped the title, but they've come back so strong and they look as good as they've ever looked, in my opinion, as good as that back-to-back winning title team. And, you know, De Bruyne, he's been lucky in the sense that he's not had... I know Aguero's missed most of the season, but he's come up with a plan to combat that, and it's worked perfectly, and which shows what a wonderful manager he is, really. Because, you know, most teams missing their all-time record scorer would really struggle. But that's just not affected them. De Bruyne's been out for a while. He's back now. But they have... pretty much, apart from Nathan Ake, I have everyone fit and available now for the running to the end of the season. So, you know, there's talk of a quadruple. I mean, it's crazy as it sounds. You know, I mean, no one's ever done apart from United, no one's ever done a treble. And we're talking about them doing a quadruple. That's how good they are.
No, it is truly remarkable. They carry on winning, and it does leave you wondering what the secret of their success is. So obviously, Andy, you asked Pep Guardiola that exact same story, which has obviously caused a little bit of a ripple, shall we say, on social media about Pep's answer. Just tell us about that, because that really amused me last night. Sort of kind of just watching that clip from the post-match press conference.
Yeah, well, it was late. It turned out to be the last question, last knocking. So I think everyone wants to get away and write the stuff up before deadline. I think probably when you raise your virtual hand that late, people go, no, don't need to put your hand down. You know, we all want to get away, get this done and have a beer or whatever. So the last question. And you know, it's one of those questions that you ask and you sort of can anticipate the answer. You know, what is if you have to put your finger on one thing during a run of 19 consecutive victories, what would it be? Fully anticipating Guardiola to reply something along the lines of, well, the incredible focus of the team, the incredible character of the team, the way they keep going, the way they refocus after every game, that sort of stuff. Incredible character, incredible spirit, blah, 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 taking a million answers that he said before. That's normally, what he says before. And, and we're going to go away. We're going to have something nice to eat, sleep, and play West Ham on Saturday. You fully expected that type of answer. But instead, he just said, well, the one thing, is we've got a lot of money to buy a lot of incredible players. And, and in a nutshell, that's it. And in a nutshell, that must be the most important thing. His view is that none of it. He then did expand slightly when I asked him whether he was being serious or not. He clearly was being serious. And
I could just about hear you guffaw, Andy.
Well, yeah, guffaw, great word, pal. It's not often I'm not guffawing, but he says, he then goes on to expand to say, well, as if to say, why are you guffawing back there? Because it's a very serious answer and a very logical answer. Because the bottom line is, he expanded by saying none of this is possible without incredibly high quality players. And of course, in a way, that just stands to reason. None of it is possible without these high quality players. Interestingly, though, I think in terms of the answer, when he says a lot of money to buy a lot of players, there's the key. It's a lot of players. And the fact is, the key to this run at the moment, if I was to say the one secret at the moment, is that he has got so many players. So he hasn't just got quality players from, say, 15, 16, 17, 18. You're talking 25 quality players, at least. So we're all marvelling now. I mean, if it's been said once, it's been said 1,000 times. Look at their bench. Their bench could beat, another team. And that's the point now. He has literally got... You mentioned Nathan Ake there earlier. Well, who can remember that they've even got Nathan Ake? No. But then that is a £40 million defender who, at the moment, is you can't remember that he actually signed. No. But they look at all the other options they've now got defensively. Now they're lucky that, again, as Jeremy said, that everyone's fit. But I think when he refers to the money buying players, he's also referring to the money buying the volume of quality players, not just quality players. The sheer volume that he's got. And if he goes through a period, which Liverpool haven't done, to be fair, where most of them, if not all of them, are fit, then that makes them such a, he's making 5 changes a game, John. He's making, and you're not noticing. You are not noticing. Who will start against West Ham on Saturday? Kevin De Bruyne will start against West Ham on Saturday. John Stones will start against West Ham on Saturday. I'm guessing now. Riyad Mahrez will probably start against West Ham on Saturday. And so you're making changes. The rotation is strictly rotation. There's no weakening the team. And I think that's the secret now of his success. He says money. I agree it's money, but it's money to buy the right players. And it's also, let's be honest, it's also getting those players playing in a way that Pep Guardiola gets them to play in.
Yeah, Matt, the one player that sort of fascinates me of late is Cancello. I have to say that basically up until this kind of period, you would have said, I'm not quite sure about him. City have maybe, sort of dropped one with him. He's not really sort of the player. And yet Guardiola seems to have really shown his absolute best, doesn't he? In terms of coaching, in terms of getting the best out of Cancello, in terms of versatility, in terms of utilising him in different areas of the pitch and different positions. I just think that's almost a bit of a Guardiola masterclass. I don't know whether you agree.
Absolutely, because last season he seemed like nothing more than someone to showcase what a fantastic consistency Kyle Walker was showing. Because more often than not, Kyle Walker had that sort of right side of defence slot and looked good in it and carried on going. And when Cancello came in, you thought, oh, well, I suppose we better give him a rest occasionally. But now he's become a force on himself, and a lot of the energy last night's performance seemed to come weirdly from him. He just seems to put things into the team that the more celebrated players thrive off. He's a little cog whirring back there that seems to make the whole thing tick. And like you say, it's come from nowhere, because there were no signs of that last season when he made the occasional appearance. And I suppose it's all to do with confidence. He's been told by Guardiola, go in, be a vital part of this team when you play, and he's taken that by the horns and run with it.
Yeah, it's amazing, really. Can West Ham, do you think, do some damage on Saturday? Can they stop them? Because after all, it's a long trip, isn't it? Sort of midweek, to neutral venues. West Ham are, I don't know, it's second to Man City are the story of the Premier League season. Let's make no bones about it. I think, in my view, because I just think Leicester are doing amazing. They would be next on my list. But then basically, I just think West Ham, because of the unexpected nature of it and the marvellous job that David Moyes is doing, what a great success story. And it almost feels like the two of them together, sort of locking horns. But you do feel a bit for West Ham going to Man City in this bear pit. But surely someone's got to do it.
Well, West Ham are always the story of the season as far as Fleet Street are concerned. But you should know that by now.
Sorry,
mate.
Sorry.
Don't forget they won the World
Every
Cup.
national newspaper becomes the New and Recorder whenever West Ham win a game.
Exactly, mate. Press box give us a wave.
It'll be a good test of where they're at, actually, West Ham, won't it? Because they are, like you said, they're the second form team in the Premier League, surprisingly pushing for a Champions League place. And they've done great. Look, it's one of the stories of the season, isn't it? But, they are now playing the best team in Europe this weekend. So this will be a gauge of how much progress they've made. They won't have much to ball. They'll have to be clinical with the chances. Jesse Lingard's playing really well.
What a story, by the way. What a
signing. Amazing story.
Disgraceful.
Your hatred of the
an England player back on form, Donny, and full of confidence and happy again.
I'm happy for that, Jeremy. Yeah, I'm just once again disgusted at how the integrity of the league has been undermined by the loan system. We're having clubs now run by other clubs. We're having the league dictated by other teams. But there you go. But sorry, on West Ham.
Yeah, does it any of you three think that West Ham can get a point, can stop the run, or will stop the run, I should say?
I think they can, and I think they've got to have a go. I know it sounds easy and sort of try to say they've got to have a go, but now what we're seeing and what you saw last night, and what you saw in fact at the Emirates on Sunday, is basically Manchester City versus a damage limitation 11. It's as simple as that. And last night, that's all it looked like. That's all it looked like. Mönchengladbach were interested in damage limitation. Unbelievably, that's pretty much what it looked like Arsenal were interested in at the Emirates on Sunday. And they're playing against a City team now that, the lads are right. They are playing, good football. They're nice to watch. You know what? I'd argue that they're not as good to watch as they have been in the past. I don't think this team right at the moment, the way they're playing, is as flamboyant, is as exciting, has got as much as a goal threat of the teams of the past, where maybe David Silva, Leroy Sané, Aguero, in combination with Sterling and whatever, we're all firing. I don't think they have. I mean, it's I wouldn't say it's workmanlike, but it's very, very professional. They're not scoring as many goals. That's just a fact, as they did in their pomp. They probably, I don't know, they're scoring a few more in the Premier League now. They're not top scorers in the Premier League, for example. So they're not as, you're not looking at this City team and thinking they're going to beat someone 6 or 7, which they could well do, but you're not looking at them in that way. They're just ultra professional. Someone said last week, didn't they, at the Emirates, it was like they get ahead early in the game, and then it's like a boxer who's just basically a Floyd Mayweather who's just happy to jab and sort of like, keep the other team at arm's length, no danger of losing on point.
No, there's definitely wasn't any danger of losing.
Well, exactly. Exactly. So, in other words, what I'm trying to say is that, and if you look at it, I thought last night watching the game, and for the first half an hour, first 21 minutes, I'm thinking, the City are, they're obviously completely in control of this game, but are they as
many chances? Did they?
Are they as threatening? Did the goalkeeper have much to do? No. The same against Arsenal. There's a lot of games now. That's why he sort of changed the way they played, isn't he? You don't expect them to concede. If you go back, it's almost a polar opposite to what was previously happening. In that we expected them to concede, but we expected them every time we saw them to score 4 or 5, and they were doing it. Remember the stats? They were scoring 5 a game, 5 every other 3 or 4 games. That's not the case now. It's the other way. We just can't see anyone scoring against Manchester City, and we can see them creating openings and scoring goals. But they're still without, Jesus is probably the player who is going through probably the most indifferent spell Yeah, and he's their only striker if you take aside Aguero, who obviously came on for a bit last night. So in the answer to your question is, can West Ham go and win there? Yes, they can. Listen, don't forget, it's only this season. And I'm sure Jeremy would have been there with me. You have to think back and think, did Leicester City really score 5 at the Etihad? Really? What happened then? Was that game just like a figure, as lockdown got to me? Did that really happen? Was it really? I mean, don't forget, that's the 5 goals. That's like a third of the goals they've conceded all season in one game. So yes, can they win? Absolutely, they can.
Yeah,
it is the Champions League.
I mean, before this season, City used to play West Ham. They'd got 9-1 wins in a row. The goals went in their 4s and the 5s, as Andy said. Yeah. But let's not forget, it was 1-1 at the London Stadium. They couldn't beat them there, and it's been so. Of course, City should roll West Ham over if you look at it player for player. But there's something about some of those players like that the Moyes has unearthed this season, like Souček, Kufal, Rice is playing well, and then like you say, Lingard's kind of put an attacking gloss into things that they're achieving so far above what they should be doing. And Antonio's, continuing to score goals again, and who would pick him as somebody to sort of rattle the back of the net regularly? And it all just seems to come together. And why not? I mean, that said, it could end up 4-0, but yeah, it might just be a 1-1 or even a 1-0 to West Ham if they nick.
Exactly. And the thing is, it's not the law of averages suggested at some stage, they will stop winning at some stage.
Well, you've got to, haven't you? I mean,
West Ham is well
equipped. Records are there.
I mean, and West Ham are as well equipped as anyone. The only thing you would say is what we've all touched on, and that's the fact that he can, when you think that a schedule is going to catch up with one of these top teams, which it probably maybe has with a couple of them, certainly with Liverpool. When you think that, you think, well, I mean, literally, they are winning the games now. Again, as we just said, they're winning the games almost within themselves. They're conserving energy within. So not only are they conserving energy within games by winning games, without having to be at maximum power. They've also got a bench of 9 players who can then come in for the next game, which, as I say, you would think, wouldn't you, if you had to guess the City team now, what would you say the City team would be? You'd say that De Bruyne will come in. For who? Not sure, really. I mean, Foden will probably drop out. Mahrez will come in. Mahrez, De Bruyne and Stones, let's face it, you would expect those 3 to come in. And maybe 1 or 2 other changes.
Aguero might even get a game.
Yes, possibly, yes.
Surely he'll take Jesus out. I mean, Matt, you were with me at the Emirates on Sunday, weren't you? And I just thought it was really interesting. Before the game, Arteta said to TV, didn't he, in the pre-match interview on the pitch, he basically said, Guardiola's got his dream today. He's playing a team without a striker and the false 9. And listen, it was 10 years ago that I tend to think in kind of, what was it, in 2010, I think that basically, football was still shocked when basically the false 9 sort of kind of thing was when that phrase was used. I think football was still shocked. And over the last 10 years, we've gradually got completely used to it. And I actually just think that Man City, I see Arteta's point in that basically, Guardiola, I thought remarkably patronising afterwards, almost patting him on the head and saying, "Oh, well done, thanks for coming." And, really good team, Arsenal and Arteta. But, I mean, you can do that when you pose absolutely no threat to your thing at all. But I just thought the thing about City was that he's so right, isn't he? That they're total football. And they might lack that incision of a real classic number 9, but they're just so amazing to watch that I think that maybe, playing the false 9 is the dream ticket. I enjoy watching Man City so much, I must say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's great to watch. I mean, it's funny what you said about Arteta there. I likened it to watching Pep Guardiola statesman-like on the end of his dugout, and Arteta shouting at every player and every ball. It was like watching Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo in opposite dugouts. And Arteta was so desperate to be the guy who was going to get at them, come on. And his enthusiasm and everything else. But there was so little sort of menace about Arsenal that City just strolled it. That they looked like they could have won it by 5 in the first 15 minutes, and then they decided, well, actually, one's enough. Let's just get through and on to the next one. And they looked, totally in control throughout. And like you say, there was such effusive praise about Arsenal. It seemed like everyone was on message. For a manager who's now, let's see what happens tonight, but now on the brink of perhaps missing out on Europe.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting one. Now, listen, my love for Man City bears no bounds, really, but we shouldn't spend the absolute whole show talking about them, despite them being absolutely fantastic. Tottenham last night. So in the space of, 5 days, we've discovered, 4 days, isn't it? I think we've discovered that Gareth Bale can still play football and Dele Alli is not bad after all. Now, I have to say, Dele Alli, the wonder goal, and Gareth Bale's brilliant second half performance at West Ham, nearly but couldn't quite save Spurs on Sunday at West Ham. Are they showing up Jose a bit? Matt, you were coming back to you, please, if I may. In the basically, you were on the. I don't know whether you were actually, but
I watched the game.
Yeah, but basically, the pre-match press conference. He was just, he was feisty, wasn't he? He was so defiant, wasn't he? He was so, and he came out punching, basically, didn't he?
Well, it was my question. It was my question at the end, if you remember, that when he said I was going to, I don't know,
taking all the glory again. Once a season, pal.
One good one. But no, when he said he was going to be there to make history for the good, for the good reasons, and he was surprisingly, I thought, quite open. You can tell when he's on the mood for it. Yeah. And you can tell when he's not. And yesterday he was laying out his calls. I kind of agree with him. I don't think Spurs were that bad against West Ham. They just didn't get any of the luck and whatever. And that's kind of how he sees it. Whether that's enough to keep Levy happy is another matter. But if it's what Spurs fans have wanted since they signed Gareth Bale, they want Kane, Son, Ali and Bale as their front four, all playing as we know they can. And last night, yesterday afternoon, it was such a ludicrous kickoff time. We got a glimpse of that. And if Bale, the way he took his goal, that's Gareth Bale full of confidence, isn't it? That's not a Gareth Bale who's worried about being made to look a fool or whatever. That was just such a ridiculously composed finish for that goal. And you think, well, if he's got that kind of belief in himself again, and he's been, he was the man of the match in the second half against, man of the second half of the match against West Ham. And if Ali's up to his tricks again, and there was, it was brilliant passes with the outside of the foot for Vinicius, and as well as his goal is kind of his Olivier Giroud goal. He can do that. And if Mourinho can get all those players buzzing, why on earth are we talking about a Spurs team who can't score goals? The answer's there in front of him. And they are the one team in those top teams who look like they are capable, aside from Manchester City, of putting a run together in these final games. And although they're coming from a long way back, there's no reason why they shouldn't, consider themselves out of the race for the top four, which could put, frighten us up quite a lot of teams who, mentioning though Liverpool's, who are expecting to be there.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Sometimes when a Bale or an Ali or players come back and embarrass the manager. But Spurs have really, really got an opportunity, as Matt says, haven't they? Sort of, Jeremy, that they can really sort of make a run right to the finish. Do you think top four's beyond them, or?
I do. Personally, I don't agree with Matt. Look, on paper, they're capable of finishing in the top four. I just think they've left themselves too much to do. City obviously will occupy first spot. Leicester are very consistent. They won't lose too many more games. Man U probably won't lose that many more games. So Chelsea are coming on strong. We'll talk about them soon. So, it'll be a big ask to finish in the top four. And I don't think the defence is strong enough to be consistent on a run of 8, 9, 10 games without defeat. So, look, it's great to see Bale and Ali back in the fold. But who knows what they play Burnley at the weekend, don't they? So, will he start Ali? Will he start Bale? Probably not. He's full of praise for Ali. And we all know he's a wonderful player when his head's right and he's got confidence from a manager. But I just think that you always feel like with Mourinho, we're talking in positive light about him today, but it was only last weekend that he was throwing the players under the bus after the defeat at West Ham. It's like you just think they're always one defeat away from an implosion with Mourinho. I've seen it all before at United and Chelsea. You just can't have any confidence that they're going to achieve great things with him. Will he be there? Will he still be Tottenham manager this time next season? I don't think so.
I mean, in a year's time.
Yeah.
You see, I think his salvation, Andy, is the cup final and the Europa League.
Yeah.
It's unthinkable. It's unthinkable that they could possibly, I know people write sort of 4 games and crunch, 6 weeks or whatever, but I just think, you've got the cup final and the Europa League alive. You're not going to get rid, are you? Even if he's, top 4 goes. I don't know what you think, but are we delaying the inevitable?
No, you're not going to get rid, and they probably won't get rid anyway, even if he doesn't. I mean, listen, it's going to be a tall order for them to beat City in the Carabao Cup final. Listen, he can save it if he just stops being such a smart aleck, really, and basically plays what it's blindingly obvious is that if you've got Harry Kane, Son, and Bale as a 3-pronged attack, put it in there, stick with it. If it doesn't work out one game, just stick with it. I mean, it's almost as though he's being deliberately, obstreperous, deliberately pig-headed. It's like Liverpool have got their front 3 is Firmino, Mane, and Salah. Which has been honed over, and okay, maybe it goes through the odd indifferent spell, which probably it is at the moment. But it is quite clearly their best front 3, and Spurs, their best front 3 has to be a guy who's won the Champions League, 4 times, a guy who has been outstanding in the main for Real Madrid, one of Europe's best players in Gareth Bale, one of Europe's best strikers in Harry Kane, and one of the world's best all-round players in Heung-min Son. I mean, it's almost as though he's too, I don't know what, Mourinho's too smart, too clever to just actually say, this is it, let's give this a run. Of as many games as it takes until the end of the season. If you then want to throw in Dele Alli behind, say, that front 3, in a way, for example, when Liverpool played with a sort of a 4 that was unstoppable with Suarez, with and Gerrard in behind. It was maybe that, just go for it. If nothing else, at least then he can always turn around and say, well, this is what you wanted, if that's the way he wants to go. To me, I would love to, the fans would love it. Maybe it's just too obvious. Maybe he won't feel that he's earning his however much, £15 million a year, if he just says, well, here's the blindly obvious thing to do. Bale, Kane, Son, Ali. That's probably, I can't speak for them en masse, but I'm sure that's what Spurs fans want to see. That would be a lovely thing to see from a football point of view. And I just don't get it. Go for it. What does he have to lose in terms of a Champions League place as in getting into those top 4? It's still a big, it's a tall order for him to do that. Do it, if you're going to fail getting into the top 4, then at least sort of like fail while having a good go at it.
Yeah, I would have to say though, Andy, on that, I think Gareth Bale is only just ready to play that part that we know of the Champions League winner, of the Europe's best player, because I think this Instagram thing a couple of weeks ago, and on face value, yes, everything's going fine. He made his debut against West Ham when Spurs were 3-0 up and they lost, and he was like, okay, it's safe to put you on, Gareth. And then last week, and that ended in disaster. And then last week, they put him on and said, go and win us back the game. And Mourinho was able, at that point, finally, to trust Bale to be the old Gareth Bale again, because it has been a mystery. He's done very little when he's played for Spurs. He scored 1 goal and, earlier on, but he hasn't looked the same sort of player. And whereas in the last 2-3 games, he looks like he's got that belief back again. And he's also, I think, after being called out by Mourinho, he's willing to put himself on the line and show that, no, I can be that player again. Whereas before, I think it suited him a little bit too much to hide behind, I'm not quite there yet, and all the rest of it.
If it's fit, Bale, you've got to start him, haven't you? Let's be honest.
Yes.
What is the point?
No, now he is fully fit. Yeah. That's what I'm with Andy. I think throw him in and because he's shown in the last sort of 2 or 3 games that he's mentally ready and physically ready to be the Gareth Bale that Spurs fans want him to be.
Isn't there a chicken and the egg here a little bit? You got to play him to get him sharp, and he hasn't been playing.
I mean, look, his fitness record's not great, is it? It wasn't at Real Madrid. He was injured a lot at Real Madrid. Missed a lot of games despite all his success. So he clearly wasn't fit when he joined them in the summer. But if he's now fitting in a good space, he's got to start him. I mean, he's a world-class player. What's the point in signing him for all that money? You know, he's on massive wages. You've got to play him.
Absolutely, mate.
Mourinho is such a stubborn character. There's clearly been issues between the two in the recent weeks. Will that get in the way of his thinking? Who knows? I mean, he just his own way, Mourinho, doesn't he? He's very stubborn.
To a degree, though, but Bale didn't exactly rip up those Europa League games that he was played in early on. I think the quality of opposition in those games are the sort that he should be a flat track bully on. My 12-year-old daughter summed it up last night when she said, "Oh, who are Spurs playing?" I said Wolfsburg, and she watched them for a few minutes and said, "Well, they're more burger than Wolf, aren't they?" But I mean, that's the caliber of the teams that you play in the Europa League. And Bale is,
Did she provide most of your intros? Or
I was going to say,
yeah, absolutely.
Just one right in the family.
Yeah, same. It was the second leg because it could have been handy. But no, Bale is the sort of player who should have been, scoring a hat trick in one of those games and showing, "No, I'm ready for it," and forcing the issue. But that never happened, and I can kind of understand where Mourinho was that he wasn't getting the player that he thought he was signing until literally the last few weeks. And let's see if he's got time now to do what he was supposed to do.
I mean, I take your points, but I still think he should have been in from day one. I still think no matter what, if you're putting Lamela or Bergwijn in ahead of him, I just don't think, that's not what you've got for. And so, and you're right. Hopefully now it will work out. I mean, bear in mind the golf courses reopen on 29th of March, so you better get in quick. Because...
Yeah,
see you there.
Yeah. Let's touch on tonight. Because Europa League, a couple of other interesting ties really. Leicester still, goalless from their first game in Prague, and then basically, you'd fancy them to go through. Although I have to say that Slavia Prague have done very, very, very well this season. So it's perhaps a difficult one. And Arsenal, right on the edge here. This game's right on a knife edge, to be honest. And if Arsenal go out, it would be that it would look like it's going to be the first time since 95-96 when they wouldn't be in Europe next season. I mean, where does this leave Arsenal, Arteta? I mean, Jeremy, I know you were particularly impressed, weren't you, with what Granit Xhaka had to say, about sort of social media yesterday, and where are Arsenal right now, and kind of, I don't know, that sort of really struck a chord with me, that Xhaka, because Xhaka is talking about abuse from his own fan base, and I just thought that sum up the nature in some way of Arsenal at the moment. There's so much infighting.
Yeah, I was impressed with what he said. He's taken the bull by the horns there and said, look, he's called them on, hasn't he, really? These online abuse, these cowards who hide behind the keyboards. I know we seem to talk about this issue every week, but good for him. He's standing up to them. He's saying he won't be bullied by anyone. Just offering to meet him on the street almost, wasn't he? Which is not like
I wouldn't fancy doing that,
No transfer. He's fighting spirit off the pitch onto the pitch is what Arsenal really need, because they look like they're a team in transition still, aren't they? Arteta's still trying to implement his strategies and his policies that he's learned under Guardiola at City, and he needs time. I mean, look, missing out on Europe would be a hefty blow for Arsenal, financially and pride-wise, because they're a club that should be competing in Europe on some level. And tonight's such a massive game. You just feel like they're treading water a bit, aren't they? I mean, obviously you see them a lot more than I do, but just lack something that's. It's a massive. I mean, the summer window for Arsenal would be huge, won't it? In terms of who they get rid of, who they can keep. They need to keep Saka, who I think's going to be a superstar. I really do. But he needs to be. He needs to think that he's playing at a club that can fulfil his ambitions, like all top players do. So that'll be key. And they need serious strengthening. But will they provide him with the money to buy the players he needs? That's debatable, isn't it? Down the years, we've seen Arsenal be sort of quite frugal with how much money they spend. So it's going to be a massive 6 months for Arsenal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think, John, that this Europa League is a bit of a dilemma for clubs? I guess probably a bit of a dilemma for Leicester. I mean, it's going to be a fiendishly difficult. It's obviously a way into the Champions League, and certainly, so for that reason, very, very worth going all out to try and win it. But you just look at it, and it's going to be a fiendishly difficult tournament to win. It really is. There are some. I mean, even just from these shows, there are certainly high quality sides there. You would have to have Manchester United down as amongst the favourites, and as you say, all the English sides, not to mention Rangers if they get through. And then you look around Europe, and there's some big sides left in this competition. It is a ferociously difficult tournament to win. You wonder, really, in terms of how serious then that's not serious, but how, considering, say, for example, someone like Leicester now, whose priority clearly will have changed a little now. They obviously the top 4 slot now is well within their grasp, and they won't want to let that slip in the same way that they let it slip previously. So I just wonder, really, I just think it's a real tough situation on how many changes you make, what teams you field in the Europa League, because while it is worth winning, it's a tough old competition to win now.
Yeah, I tell you what, I think what was really telling was that, and I fully expect him to do the same tonight, in that Arteta full strength, in Benfica. Listen, they didn't play particularly well, I don't think, in that first leg. I mean, I think it was a bit of a shame, actually. Sort of kind of Odegaard's arrivals has rather diluted Smith Rowe's effectiveness, and the Smith Rowe Saka axis.
Has he got a nickname, Smith Rowe?
Go on. No, go on. I thought you were going to give us one.
No, well, I was only because I heard it about 10 times last Sunday. Someone called him, what was it, the Croydon De Bruyne?
Croydon De Bruyne. Right, well, I was there, so I didn't
you were in there, yes. So you were spared that. Right. Go on, sorry, John.
Listen, I thought that was really telling that basically that they're putting their eggs in the Europa basket. I don't know, but I don't feel as if Leicester, their priority would be the Europa League. I think Leicester's priority would be top 4.
Absolutely.
And therefore I probably feel that Man United and Tottenham have got much more, chance of winning the Europa League than perhaps the other English teams. And I'd put them right at the top of the tree. But you couldn't possibly, Arsenal have stretched themselves financially. And if they don't make Europe, and I don't think they will, by the way, you can say, okay, the positive is that they basically don't have the Thursday night, Sunday distraction next season, and maybe it's a clearer path. But it's so wrong, and it's so, so naive to think, we're better off without the Europa League, because in these times you need that money. It's absolutely huge, and I think that the clubs will miss it. So it is a really interesting debate, and Arsenal got some big name players who won't be happy about being out of Europe. I mean, they're probably not very happy about being out of the Champions League, but they thought, right, we'll give it another season, try and get back there. So I do think that's it's a real worry. But listen, we must move on to Chelsea. So I'm going to hit with you, Andy, in that basically, come on, for weeks and months you had told us about sort of Frank Lampard, and thought that Frank Lampard was, getting a bit of an easy ride, and, perhaps, Chelsea needed to make a change. So you're born out really with Thomas Tuchel. You're not necessarily saying like for like, but Thomas Tuchel, eight games, 6 wins, 2 draws, 10 goals, 2 conceded. Wow, that's some improvement and some impact.
Yeah, he's done very well. I think he's had a run of fixtures that could have been tougher, And I mean, just going back to Frank, it was just. I still just quickly on Frank. I just still think the job was too soon for him. Simple as that. I just think he was too inexperienced. A year of what turned out to be a failure to get Derby, promoted from the Championship. Just wasn't enough experience for him to handle a job that is an elite job. It's a blue chip job. It's one of the big 6. It's one of the big clubs of Europe. And someone like Thomas Tuchel, is a coach now who belongs in that, whether you like it or not, in that cabal of elite coaches. So it was a logical replacement, as much as it went against the emotions of many Chelsea fans. many journalists, obviously, who like Frank a lot, and we all do. It was just too soon for him, and I think now that's being borne out. But and interestingly, now you're looking at Tuchel. Say if you want to compare him with Lampard, he's devoid of all the emotional baggage. He's stripped of any emotional baggage, isn't he? With Lampard, there was always that tie there, which could be a good thing, but more often than not, it brought an unbelievable amount of extra pressure as the legend, as the hero, as the Messiah type of thing. Who was one of the club's best ever players, and all the time it looked from the outside as though that weighed really heavy on Lampard. That extra pressure. It looks like Tuchel basically. Is so confident in his own skin, is so confident in his own ability, is so, if you want it, cocksure that he doesn't really care. So if someone asks him about why did you take Callum Hudson-Odoi off, he's not bothered about who it might upset, what it might upset, or how it might reflect on other players. Well, he just says, well, I took him off because he was rubbish, because I didn't, I sent him on, didn't do what I said, you're off. And there's a manager, whether you like it or not, who is absolutely, it's almost in a different, well, not in a different, but with a slightly different personality. It's almost Mourinho-esque. He is absolutely clearly, absolutely sure of himself in everything he does, whether he's right or wrong, and whether you think it was right or wrong to do what he did to Hudson-Odoi, it doesn't matter. He's like. So
what impressed me was he then started him against Atletico Tuesday night, which showed everyone, look, no hard feelings. Apparently Hudson-Odoi reacted really well to that, being hooked against Southampton. So, I thought that was
isn't that sometimes it's about perception and it's about timing, isn't it? Because if Frank Lampard does that 6 weeks ago, Frank Lampard gets killed, and me and Matt the other day were on sort of the Jose call, and Jose couldn't resist saying that basically one of my managerial colleagues went too far. Well, it's hard to imagine that he wasn't talking about Thomas Tuchel, because Thomas Tuchel's takedown of Hudson-Odoi was brutal, and yet we are talking about the honeymoon period for Thomas Tuchel, aren't we?
I didn't like
perception. I thought it was brutal. To be honest,
what I didn't like about it, John, is that he did his talking to. He had obviously had an issue with Callum Hudson-Odoi. He insisted on doing it in front of the rest of the squad, like that was some sort of team bonding exercise. Jeremy, I think you were there when a certain manager wanted to give a dressing down to a journalist at an airport one morning and insisted the rest of the press pack listen to it, and it was just bullying.
Come on, who was that? What was that?
If you sorry,
David O'Leary.
To who?
Mirror reporter back in the day in Edwards, it was
Ian Edwards.
He had a beef with a piece he'd written and said, "I want to have a word with you," and we all backed away. And he said, "No, I want the rest of you lot to listen to this as well."
We're in there like flies.
And it was just a case of him flexing his muscles against one of the pack. And I don't know, like you say, that plays out well when you're winning, but when you're losing and there's a bit of resentment amongst the squad about the manager, and you think that he's being a bit heavy-handed anyway, that's the sort of behaviour that is a very high risk of strategy. I think when you to ball out Callum Hudson-Odoi and make him, he was all smiles and shaking hands afterwards, but that could have gone differently. It's only got to go differently a couple of times, and suddenly you're a club in crisis with a dressing room against you. And
like you say, Hudson-Odoi will have his confidants in the dressing room, his big pals, and they wouldn't have taken kindly to that, would they? Really? So that's the risk.
That's the feeling, isn't it? He smiles on the surface, but then you say, "I can't believe you did that to me."
I can't believe I've upset. Here's some guy who's like, done X amount for his, massive contract and whatever. Listen, he just told a few honest truths. I mean, it makes me smile when I read stuff about and I watch programs and it's saying like, Thomas Tuchel should keep this in house, and it's like, he's saying this in front of people and whatever. Well, you know what? Is this the business we're in? We ask a question, he gives an honest answer. Absolutely fantastic. No, I don't want it kept behind dressing room doors. I want it in the headlines of newspapers. Thanks very much. I want them to answer questions. we're asking him. It's like, well, hang on. It's a bit like just going off on a tangent. It's a bit like Raiola. It's like Mino Raiola. Is we all say, this is, he's terrible for opening his mouth. He's terrible for whatever. Now, when he doesn't say anything, we'll be gutted. I mean, where's the headlines? Raiola slams United and Pogba wants out. Yeah. The thing is, we want.
I thought Raiola the other day was far too conciliatory. It's great.
So when Tuchel was asked this question, it's great. And really, are we that worried about the sensitivities of Callum Hudson-Odoi or any other Premier League player who basically, will get contracts that some fans maybe don't think they deserve? Are they really that sensitive souls that when Thomas Tuchel is asked why he brought Callum Hudson-Odoi off, he said he wasn't doing what I was saying? Well, we could have guessed that, by the way. He didn't bring him off because he thought, well, I'll give him a rest. But then Tuchel's just, I love the honesty. Just going quickly back to David O'Leary, you mentioning that. That's what's really funny. Him singling out the player. Do you remember David O'Leary did call one of our colleagues and said, out of the blue, and said, hi, hello, it's David O'Leary. He says, I'm just checking you've got my number. To which our colleague says, oh, yes, thanks, I have, David. He says, right, never use it. Put the phone down.
Who was that to?
I can't tell you that because I haven't got his permission. But anyway, there was explicit. I'm just checking you've got my number. Yes, in that soft lilt, we'll never use it.
The thing is, Crossy, Tuchel is paid big bucks to make decisions he thinks are right. So, he shouldn't be criticised for having the temerity to put a player on and then sub him off half an hour later. So what? It's a man's game, isn't it? They've got
exactly. He shouldn't be scared of upsetting Callum Hudson-Odoi and his dressing room confidence.
It's just perception. Hey, listen, maybe it's the tough love we need. I mean, it sort of, I compare it to almost the Mourinho sort of thing with Dele Alli opening day of the season against Everton. Well, Mourinho, took a lot of stick for that, for basically subbed him off at half time. Well, the fact of the matter is, he started Dele Alli for the first game of the season. Well, putting you in the starting lineup for the first day of the season is actually a statement saying that you're one of my main men. You're my 11th, and I just think that was it should have been a bigger message, than actually the subbing off. Don't see it as an insult. So I get both sides, and we want absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I hate people like me saying, "Oh, we shouldn't be doing that in public."
Well, exactly, John. I mean, just fine. Do you remember when we all once appeared on a much missed Sunday morning breakfast show? Whose absence is much lamented now by the viewing public. And we used to all sit around the table.
They're taking the place of the podcast. You see?
Well, exactly. Hopefully, yes. Do I get the same fee? But remember, and we used to sit around at breakfast time, and we'd say, and then one of the number would say, like, "Oh, well, that's the sort of thing that should be kept behind closed doors. That should be in, what stays in the dressing room. This should be said behind." And look at the thing. If it was, we wouldn't be here. I mean, we would not be here. No to behind closed doors.
Oh, absolutely. I applaud it 100%, but I'm not a Chelsea fan, so I think that's bottom line.
Anyway,
let's move on to Liverpool. Here's the old chestnut. I feel like Liverpool is almost like I've got a couple of items left on the 3 items left on the agenda. Liverpool and relegation scrap. We're not quite there, Liverpool, but it does seem this. I mean, it's an amazing story, really, for Liverpool. Incredibly sad to see, the goalkeeper Alisson, suffered losing his father this morning, and to see news emerge of that. So terrible news on that front. And I must say, Liverpool's season just is. I don't know where to start, really. I mean, it feels bizarre that basically they lost that Merseyside derby, and it was a huge story last weekend. Please don't get me wrong, but equally, because there's so much going on in the week, we seem to have moved on very quickly in newspaper terms from that, and yet it feels like it's another huge game at Sheffield United on Sunday at Bramall Lane, because Sheffield United, I don't know, probably gone now. Let's be honest, and they're expected to win, but that in its own way presents its own pressure to Jurgen Klopp again, because they have to win, don't they? I mean, it's a real crisis point for Liverpool still, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, I think. Look, if you could pick one team to play when you needed to get back on the horse, so to speak, it's Sheffield United. They're going to go down. I think we know that. It's inevitable. And Liverpool, should win that game 2-3, 4-0, really. But who's going to predict anything now? I mean, their sort of demise this season has been astonishing. It's becoming astonishing now, isn't it? When you think about it. They've lost 4 home games on the spin. They went all that time without losing a game. They've now lost 4 on the spin for the first time in nearly 100 years. That's how rare that happens. Yeah. And obviously there's on the pitch, they've got lots of problems. We all know about the injuries. They've lost Henderson now with a hamstring problem. He was playing centre-back instead of midfield. And you do feel like now you start thinking, is there something more to this? No club can have so many injuries in a season. It's just astonishing, really. And you start to wonder, is there more to it? Is he training them too hard? I don't know. Look, it may just be bad luck and, horrendously bad luck with it. So, and then, you see these sad things happening off the pitch as well, with Klopp's mum dying and now Alisson's dad dying as well. You just think it's all like it all feels like it's coming into one, a perfect storm sort of thing, and horrible to see, really, because there was such a great side last season.
Incredible. And
the challenge now for Klopp is, which, I think he's on his worst run as a manager since 2013, 2014. So it's a challenge for him to re-energise the team. I mean, this season's probably gone now in terms of the title. There's nowhere near winning the title. They probably won't win the Champions League because they're not playing well enough. So, that you'll get found out eventually in the latter stages, I would imagine. So,
does he have to rebuild from here?
I don't think he has to rebuild, but he has to do some serious tweaking. I mean, the look. My worry for Liverpool is when you see them play, their energy levels are low, and they look like a team. The front three aren't functioning properly, and that's been their huge asset over the last 2 or 3 seasons. They're missing chances. They look low on confidence. They look like a team full of players, or some players in that team who know that they've probably had it as good as it's ever going to get at Liverpool. They won the first title in 30 years. They've won the Champions League, got to another final. It's hard staying at the top when once you reach it. Yeah. Even City found that out, and now they've come back stronger, City, and that's the challenge for Klopp now, is to work out who he needs to sign and sign the right players and go again next season and try and do what City have done, make up that gap. I mean, the point swing between City and Liverpool is astonishing. Yeah. Between this season and last season, it's something like 30-odd points. It's remarkable. Yeah. So, look, they're too big a club not to come back strongly. But if you were Klopp, you'd be thinking City are now looking like a team that will dominate for the next 2-3 seasons if they carry on with Guardiola at the helm. Because they'll keep spending money too. They'll keep getting stronger. So it's a real challenge.
It is.
Do they make top 4, Andy?
I think they probably, I think they will make top 4. I do think it's going to be a real battle for them to make top 4. I came away from Anfield last Saturday night, and my overriding thought, while it was a great evening for Everton, it was a very disciplined, very organised performance from Everton with some great individual displays, certainly defensively, from the likes of Godfrey, Keane, Tom Davis in front of the defence. All that, but my overriding thought was I was genuinely surprised at how insipid and how unthreatening this Liverpool team were, especially when we are used to seeing them cause a threat every time they're in possession. Basically, that's something that we became accustomed to during that great run. Now, I think you've also got a perfect storm, most of which Jeremy's referred to, a perfect storm of factors behind this run. The injuries, yes, it's an excuse, but it's a very valid excuse to have that number, that welter of injuries that they've had to contend with. So in key positions as well, particularly obviously with Van Dijk and Gomez. So I think that's a factor. Secondly, again, this applies to every club. I know that before people, get on my back about it, but particularly the absence of crowds at Anfield certainly affects games like that, when they certainly wouldn't have been allowed to be. So I don't know. I'm not saying there was no urgency about them to try and get back into that game against Everton, but there certainly wasn't as much as there would be if they had 50,000 people bellowing at them from the stands. So the absence of crowds does have an effect there as well. So that's one of the factors. Secondly, long term, I also agree with Jeremy that it's hard to maintain that intensity. But the issue is that long term is if they have to go out and spend money, this is a broad question that you debate for hours, but are FSG going to be in a position to challenge or to spend enough money to rival the ownership, say, of Manchester City? Now, you will point to the fact that they bought big in that they spent record fees on Alisson and on Virgil van Dijk. But bear in mind, that was money that was basically brought in from a record fee from Philippe Coutinho. Mm. So, the books were essentially pretty much balanced. Now, post-pandemic, whether FSG are prepared to even try and cross financial swords with someone like City is a very moot point. So long term, they've got issues. Short term, in answer to your question, I think they'll make top four. I think it will be a real struggle. Bear in mind now, again, with respect to these guys, they are going to have to face games now with a centre half partnership, probably of Kabak and Phillips, or which they ended with against Everton, and that's vulnerable, no matter which way. And there's other issues that have come to light. The two fullbacks aren't in the sort of form that we've been in. Again, it's probably all their kick on from Van Dijk being missing, etc. You look at Thiago, and you still wonder if Thiago, as wonderful a player he is actually suited to Jurgen Klopp's style of play. And then, of course, as Jeremy referred to, the front three just maybe aren't firing. So they've got a real battle to make the top four. I think they just will.
Yeah, no, it's a fascinating one. Guys, I'm going to move on to the relegation scrap, because it is suddenly, I do think that for a few weeks we thought that was settled, really. And, the bottom three were so far adrift of safety that everyone consigned it. But Fulham are making a real fight of it, aren't they? And, it is fascinating now, and I mean, what do we think, guys? I think Newcastle perhaps look most vulnerable. Stories around this week of Newcastle's 7-man shortlist to replace Steve Bruce. Are they going to get rid? I don't think so.
Not very short, is it?
No, exactly. But Fulham, let's be honest here, are the ones, aren't they? They're the ones that are sort of making life slightly nervy for Newcastle. Who else? Brighton? Do we think a little bit? Burnley? Surely not. But just
the one team to watch is Southampton crossing.
Yeah.
Free fall. I mean, they got that 9-0 donking at United, and the question was, can they recover? I mean, they recovered after it happened against Leicester, but they just haven't shown any bounce back from that hammering. And they are. I don't know what the run is, but it's pretty grim. And they'll run 30 points. So they're probably 3 wins away from maybe being safe.
Yeah.
Where will those wins come from? I mean, that obviously them getting relegated would rely on those below them winning the games they need to overtake them. But Fulham went 14 without a win, and they've won 2 of the last 3, so they're on the up. You just look at Scott Park and you see such a feisty little guy, don't you? Yeah. You just think he's instilled some confidence and spirit into that team at just the right time. Newcastle, obviously, you've got to fear for them, haven't you? They've lost Callum Wilson.
Yeah.
Where the goal's going to come from. The pressure's on Bruce every game. He's getting battered on social media. What's the point in sacking him now? Absolutely no point whatsoever. Keep him till the end of the season. If they stay up, then you've got a decision to make. If they get relegated, obviously he'll get sacked, and then you've got to look at who you would bring in, who would be the most suitable manager to get them straight back up again. But, the problem Newcastle have is the owner, isn't it? Mike Ashley. Whenever he's in charge, who is going to want to manage them working under those, perimeters that he puts down in place at St James's Park? So one thing we do know is that probably the relegation fight's going to be slightly more exciting than the title race.
Yeah, I think it's more of a contest, isn't it? The thing that worries me, guys, is that Fulham can they score enough goals? That's the issue. They've drawn so many games and so many times. It's because they can't put the ball in the net.
Yeah, I mean, we had the sort of the Scott Parker press conference was basically on the repeat button, wasn't it? We played ever so well. We moved around nicely, and we didn't win basically, and that went on ad nauseum, didn't it? Until until they actually got a very good win at Goodison Park. And they are capable. There's goals in that team. I think there is goals in that team for the way they play. And I think they will. They're not going to get hammered by anyone. They will pick up wins. I also think, as it happens, it'll be probably too late, and I just wish he'd somehow made a better start to his mission. But I think West Brom will surprise a few people. From what I've seen lately, I was at the game against Manchester United. Myself and you, John, were there, and I was impressed with West Brom that day. And if you remember, they could have actually nicked it. I think Diagne up front has made a big difference. And they were down to 10 men at Burnley and should have won the game. Certainly should have won the game. I mean, how they quite contrived to miss those couple of late chances, I don't know. So I do think they'll pick up some points as well, which won't be enough probably, but still might put a bit of pressure, as Fulham will, on a couple of teams above, notably on Newcastle, maybe on Palace, and certainly as Jeremy says, Southampton are plummeting, and again they'll probably just have enough. But I'm with you. I just hope that there is a semblance of a tussle, of a bit of jeopardy down there, because my fear, certainly 3 weeks ago, my fear was that those bottom three get marooned, and then we end up with basically not much to play for throughout a lot of the league, and we end up with a lot of pretty meaningless games. I don't think hopefully that's not going to be the case now.
No, absolutely. Let's look at a couple of things that sort of thrown up this week. Really, everyone was delighted, weren't they, about sort of the positive news, perhaps in sort of a way out of lockdown. Let's hope that goes to plan, God willing, and everyone is safe and well. But the final day of the season. Now, should we have fans back the final day of the season if it's just for the final day of the season? And it's, we are talking about sort of test events. So, we've potentially got the cup final and the obviously the FA Cup final and the Carabao Cup final, possibly some test events at Premier League games. But it comes down to, having it as one game, and you've got fixtures that could decide Champions League places, European places, and indeed the relegation scrap with Fulham entertaining Newcastle. Should we have fans back for the final day of the season?
You know what, Jai? It's funny, until you actually wrote the story very quickly about the debate about whether we should have fans back. It never crossed my mind. It never ever crossed my mind. When straight away when the roadmap, the infamous roadmap was announced. And straight away we thought, oh, that's great, because we can have fans back for the last game of the Premier League season. Not a bit of me, it probably should have, but probably a reflection. I mean, not a bit of me thought, oh, well, that might be unfair. I know when you read it, of course, people have got a point. You actually wonder with what people's first reaction is to think whether it'll be unfair or not. Most people would be glad of having that amount of people anywhere, regardless of how fair it is on a relegation scrap. But now you actually mention it, and now it has actually been brought up. It does actually make sense if you're over the euphoria of allowing, well, it'll be 10,000 people. It won't be obviously a full crowd. I guess realistically, it would be unfair. I mean, it would be. There was even when only was it 4? I can't even remember now. Was it 4,000 or 2,000 were allowed in?
Two,
yes, and somewhere like when Leeds. Obviously, and Manchester clubs and Leeds United obviously were not allowed to have any in because they were in a higher tier. And when they said, "Oh, well, that's unfair," and everyone thought, "Oh no, well, get a grip, lads. It's only a couple of thousand." They did have a point as well, because when you listen to players who were saying, "Actually, you know what? It made a difference," and I think Liverpool was one. Where Liverpool players turned around and said, actually, you know what? There's only, 2,000 in the stadium, but it makes a big difference. So when they say that, it sort of only strengthens the arguments that if you then had 10,000 home fans in for a decisive game on the last day of the season, then I guess it would be unfair. And I guess in the interest of competitive balance, then it wouldn't really do any harm to say, listen, play this last game, play game 38 behind closed doors like you played all the rest, and at least then it's a level playing field.
Andy, it makes a difference if a team has a massive injury crisis. It makes a difference if the sun's in the goalkeeper's eyes 1.5 and then dips below the stand for the second. There's so many random things in sport that make a difference that if we can have fans back, we had 2,000 fans at random grounds back in the day, and on the final day, if we can have supporters there to see off their team at the end of a very difficult season, then I don't think any manager can stand up and say that's not fair, because lots of things aren't fair. It makes a difference if a referee has a stinker and gives an awful decision.
Yeah, but I must say, I think it's not. We must clarify here. It's not the Premier League saying this, because the Premier League has to be seen, and I think welcoming back is clubs. And so I think there's always a difference between kind of the managerial view and the hierarchy view. And there's no doubt about it. I do think that basically Fulham final day of the season, you get 2,000 Fulham fans in, they'll give Fulham a lift. There's no doubt about it.
Exactly. If you've got 10,000, if it is Newcastle going there and they haven't been able to have any fans in, and if self-professed Fulham say, well, 10,000 fans will give us an incredible lift, then why would Newcastle agree to? And I see what Matt's saying about all the excuses. Exactly, and that makes it unfair. So if the sun is in someone's eyes in the second half, not the first, that might make it unfair. But there's really nothing, not even someone like Jose or you, Matt, could do about the sun rising and falling. However, there is something
I could stand in its way if you like.
But there is something you can do about that. There is something you can do about the injustice of having a home following for one decisive game. I'm with you. I mean, I think that if you could have a capacity crowd, I think we'll do it. But I'm afraid I do understand that if someone like Newcastle, for example, if it was sort of win or bust down of Fulham and all of a sudden they were allowed 10,000 people in, then I think they probably would have a point.
Again, if it's that home game,
the Thames there, I can't imagine it's that intimidating.
Does your favourite football song of all time? Does your butler know you're here?
Well,
what you're saying about Fulham fans, but listen, I'm just going to also touch on the Euros. I just briefly on this one, but. Can we really still hold it across 12 countries? I mean, and the UEFA is sort of making the noises, and it's positive news as well in that announcement, because obviously the sort of the semi-finals and the final, and as well as England group games, are being held at Wembley. But UEFA are very bullish about this, but you keep on hearing whispers. I mean, none more so than sort of kind of Oliver Dowden supposedly speaking to UEFA, about sort of, don't worry, we can hold it hold it all in England, which is something that, Gareth Southgate has even said publicly. So, I mean, what do we think, guys? I mean, could we host it in England? Could it happen? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, listen, how many times, sorry, Jeremy, but how many times do we say, ahead of, whenever there's any doubts about a tournament or about any major sporting events, we always say, oh, it's okay, we're ready, we can step in. I mean, it just happens time and time again, doesn't it? And that's because, obviously, we do have the infrastructure in terms of the stadium to step in. I'm sure, listen, by the way, I'm sure UEFA are probably getting calls from other cities around Europe. They're probably getting calls from Baku, from other big cities in Europe saying, listen, it's okay, we can step in. I'm sure that's the case. So I'm sure England could. I think, strange enough, the more your initial point of view is, how can it possibly be held across the in the original format? But I don't know. They're playing Champions League games, Europa League games in venues. Obviously, City played in Hungary last night. Liverpool in Bucharest. A couple of them were in Bucharest. One in Italy. So listen, they can still play abroad. So I mean, I guess what is.
Yeah, but some countries are off limits, aren't they? Like, we can't go to Germany, we can't go to Spain.
Well,
so I feel sympathy for UEFA in the sense that the COVID situation is so fluid and it's at various stages of reproduction in different parts of the continent. So that's probably not going to change between now and April, May. There'll be different countries with different infection rates. Vaccinations is obviously a huge part of it now. They know that. So why are they waiting until April to make a decision? They need to take a bold decision now and say, right, where is the most suitable country to stage the tournament? Because
Jeremy, though, can I just say, as a resident of Kent, you don't get that much profile in global stage, we've now got our own strain of coronavirus. That just emerged from literally nowhere. Not me personally, thankfully, touch wood. But no, in all seriousness, this disease crops up anywhere at short notice. There could be a flare up, and if we all say let's all go to London and have it all there, it could be, God willing, no. But the next big variant of the disease crops up in London. And then the whole thing.
Why don't we just say?
I don't know if keeping options open and keeping it as a wider tournament. It's easier if, say, 2 countries are suddenly off limit when it comes to the crunch and we have to start playing games. Then we can reshuffle things, putting it all on one country. And if you have the disease flare up in that country a week before the tournament, then there's nothing UEFA can do. I don't agree with the whole principle of the whole thing, but on these very special occasions, in these very special circumstances, I don't think UEFA are in a bad position. As long as they keep everyone on ready, make sure that those that want to host can host still, keep on top of it. The clubs, the countries don't actually need to know. The fans, depends on whether we can accept fans. If people are saying in June, yes, fans can go, then let's open up travel. But let's be honest, the travel industry is in a state of flux at the moment. It's not like fans can go out and book tickets tomorrow. Let's keep our options open as long as possible. And then the travel companies, I'm sure, will be delighted to help fans move and get to games as much as possible because they need the business. And let's just take common sense and let the disease, let's bow down to this disease for a little while longer and say, no, you are actually in control. Let's not try and force things. Let's see what COVID has in store for us for another month or so, and then see where the land lies. But to try and shepherd it into one country now could be a huge mistake.
Yeah, I think the front of Build this morning aren't they decrying how jealous they are of England's vaccination?
We envy you.
We envy you. It's remarkable how we're doing something better than the Germans, which must be a first. But guys, I'm going to finish on a little light-hearted note. I just thought Olivier Giroud. I mean, people might argue Dele Alli's goal in favour of Giroud's goal, but I have to say I thought Giroud's goal, just because of the sheer nature of the top-class opposition, and then also the tight nature of the game. I mean, it was just, and because of the amazing story that he became at 34 and a half, frankly, that he became the oldest player in Champions League history to score in the knockout stages. And so in honour of that, what a remarkable victory for Chelsea, by the way, as well. What in football, and indeed in life, guys, is getting better with age.
You are, John.
Oh, well, it's nice of you to say. I've turned 50 a few months ago, so hey. Yeah. Well, you'll know that. You joined my virtual party. It's very nice.
I'm going to go Ancelotti. He's in his 60s now.
Yeah.
Just got a landmark win at Liverpool, leading Everton to what could be a Champions League place. This guy's won everything there is to win, managed every club there is to manage. Just seems to be just doing a remarkable job at Everton. Just so impressed. I think we're so lucky to have him in the Premier League.
Yeah. When I grow up, I want to be Carlo Ancelotti. I think it's just amazing. When I grow up, I want to be Carlo Ancelotti. I just love him. He's amazing.
Got to be one of the coolest 60-odd-year-olds on the planet.
You're right.
Exactly. But I'll tell you what, without being a miserable so-and-so, it is worth bearing in mind that Everton have managed to lose in their last 5 games at home, to lose to Fulham, to lose to Newcastle, to lose to Leeds, to lose to Man City, to fair enough, and to draw with Leicester. I'll tell you what, Cool cuts you a lot of slack. You can guarantee that. You know, casually blow into your tea, and it cuts you a lot of slack. But no, he's brilliant, and he's lifted Everton. And while you're on about things getting better with age, you know what?
Yeah, come on, let's have yours.
You know what I thought? I mean, talking about age, listen, there's more players than Giroud, isn't there? I mean, look at what Ibrahimovic is doing in Serie A. What Cristiano, continues to do. These guys will be eligible for the jab soon, won't they? You know what I mean? Someone wrote that the only shot they should be interested in is made by Pfizer. Now, I'm not sure which particular drug, the Pfizer drug they were referring to, but probably both, if anyone knows that. But anyway.
Great line.
But I tell you, but things that get better with age. I thought about this, and I was reading Brian Reed's column this morning in our paper, in the Daily Mirror, about about Everton's impending move. Now we're talking Everton, and Jeremy mentions Carlo. I thought about this move to the new stadium, and I was there the other day for a game. Which game was it? It was I can't remember. Oh, it was the cup game against Tottenham, the 5-4 at Goodison Park. And Goodison Park just gets better with age, doesn't it? I mean, it's just fantastic. You know what? That night I think there were probably 80 people in this, 80 people in the stands, and that was it. And I still had a restricted view. You couldn't make it, and you'll miss those type of things. You'll miss that pillar in your way, so you can't see the goal of the Gladys Street end. You'll miss the wooden seats. Remember when Farmer Shearer was being shown round the ground before he's because he'd never been there before by Bill Kenwright, and he's pointing up and he's saying to Bill, "Are they really wood?" You know what I mean? Yes, they are, mate. They've been there since whenever. Those narrow turnstiles, the whole place shaking, and Goodison Park, because it's becoming more and more of an anachronism in football, just gets better and better. It just smells of football. Upton Park has gone and was lamented, and maybe won't be as lamented if West Ham do well. And that was that type of stadium. And I just think those type of grounds just get better and better with age.
That would have been that night when
exactly, and that's what gets better with age. And just very quickly, now you mentioned Carlo, though, about how cool. I haven't told you the story about when it was a home game, one of his early home games at Stamford Bridge.
No,
and so it's half time. And bear in mind, it's one of his very, very early games, and half time you nip outside for a break. Let's put it that way, half time, and next you look over the shoulder, and there's Carlo having a crafty. So you look at him, and I think they were looking at him, and you can tell that you're a bit like, shouldn't you be in there, sort of rousing the troops and sort of giving last minute tactical, switches and whatever. And one of the chaps says to him, Carlo, and he says, listen, you're not watching the game. He says, we're 3-0 up. What have I got to say? Basically, chill out. We're 3-0 up. Go back out, boys. I'm just off for a crafty, oily rag. Superb. Cool, as you like.
Yeah,
and then obviously
I like
a coffee in the other hand, and etc.
Yeah, I like it. Dunny, I'm going to serve you with a nightmare shift following Andy.
Andy
come on,
again.
What gets better with age?
Well, flipping the question the other way, it was a bit of a shock to be sounded out by Jose Mourinho earlier in the week for having been a lot worse when I was younger. When he was talking about the call you on. I thought that was a little bit harsh. Well, he said, "Thank God I'm a better journalist than I was 10 years ago," but I don't know what that's based on. We're just talking about generally things maturing with age, in particular Jose in this case. I was going to go for James Milner, but I've already had my quota of Leeds United stories for today with David O'Leary. So what I'll instead go with, the thing that improves with age, I think, is Arsene Wenger's performance in the last few years of his tenure at Arsenal. Because much as he was pilloried, it seems like those
largely
fans...
by you.
Mainly by me, but those fans were just burning aviation fuel for nothing. It was, what's happened to the club since. It shows perhaps how well he was fighting against the ownership structure to do what he did manage to do in keeping the club in Europe, and perhaps a bit of a revisit on those last few years. And every year that goes on with Arsenal struggling, you think, actually, a couple of cups and regular Champions League football wasn't that bad after all.
It's it's difficult to concentrate because the boys are actually putting the cricket score up in the chat.
Is that a cricket score or a football tour? Someone's put 0-2 up there.
Two rings a bell. No, I agree with you, Matt. I do agree with you. I do think that it is highly. It always makes me laugh at the moment to see the sort of Arsenal fan TV sort of now regularly put up these, posts of adulation towards Arsene Wenger, and I just thought, hang on a minute, you've forgotten about the sort of the last 10 years of his reign when you're desperately trying to hound him out and sort of having post-match shows about how bad he was, and now you're saying he's an absolute legend. Make your mind up, lads. But anyway, it does put it in, context.
Just quickly, maybe ahead, we can discuss what Wenger's like as a pundit. Don't you think? He's got to say something controversial soon, hasn't he? Otherwise, it's just going to.
Have you read his book? If you've read his book,
yeah. You know what? My dad bought it to me for Christmas, and I've started it, John. But I'm struggling, mate. I really am.
He doesn't say anything, does he?
No, and that's the thing.
He doesn't say anything, and everything's so brief.
It's like everyone's desperate to get a headline out of Wenger as a pundit, and it's just
Yeah.
Anyway, that's for another day.
Dunny and still not had a drink of alcohol.
Yeah, exactly.
Remarkable stuff.
Yeah, I've succumbed. Anyway, guys, thank you so much. We've not had a cricket update while we're saying goodbye, have we? No.
8 for 2 now.
8 for 2. There you go. That's what Arsenal were at Old Trafford a few years ago, weren't they? Boom. Right. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining me and everyone. It's a pleasure to have your company. We've got through a hell of a lot today, actually, haven't we? So put the world to rights as well. So really good fun, really good company. Thanks so much. And I actually should have got through some readers' points, but there you go. Something to look forward to next week, where I hope you will join us again, same time, same place. We're looking forward to it. Have a good week.